This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you by Bitrefill. Bitrefill is the best way to spend your crypto in Latin America. Purchase gift cards or mobile refills from more than 3,500 brands in 186 countries instantly, safely, and privately. Visit bitrefill.com for more information. Welcome back to the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. My guest today is Jacob Topley. He's an offshore investment consultant based in Mexico City. Jacob, how's it going?
All good, thank you. Vance, how are you?
Doing well, thanks. And you are calling in today from Mexico City?
That's right in the heart of, well, kind of the people call it the Beverly Hills, kind of Polanco area of Mexico, but it's not too bad. A bit outside of the touristy bit.
Calling in from a lush, expensive office in Polanco. Jacob Topley, British accent.
I try sometimes.
That's all we need. That's what we need. I think every expat needs a British accented financial planner based in Mexico.
Well, I think it helps. I know that in terms of I think the passport bros would do better if they put on a British accent. That's for sure.
I think everyone would. I think my podcast would be better if I had a British accent. So, would this episode be specifically for expats living in Mexico, maybe people with temp, PR, expats living in Mexico, or are a lot of the concepts we're going to talk about today relevant to expats all over Latin America?
They're relevant for expats all over LATAM, but it's all going to depend on which country that you're kind of residing in or making your kind of permanent base. Because places like Panama, for example, you already the sort of local options, if you like, that you can access using kind of account options and strategies based in Panama, they're going to be better compared to somewhere like Mexico or somewhere like Colombia, where your options are much more limited.
And my understanding is the issue is that expats living in Latin America often have limited investment opportunities compared to when they were back in their home country, especially if they've now taken up residency in Latin America, because they might not have access to all the same investment accounts that they had back home. Like in Canada, people had the TFSA. In the US, you have your 401k and different things. And in the UK, Europe, there's other things. And once you become a non-resident of Canada, a non-resident of Europe, you don't have the same ability to continue funding those investment accounts domiciled over there. So I guess the idea is to start investing where you now have residency, let's say in Mexico. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, kind of. I think it's more a case of trying to find something that's going to allow you to invest and access the account from wherever you happen to be in the world, like including if you want to go back to your home country. Because obviously people move to LATAM for various different reasons at different stages in their life, right? So there's people that are kind of coming here that are younger, they get a job where they can work from anywhere, and they're just kind of traveling around, being a bit of a nomad. And then what I see is when I meet with clients or potential clients here in Mexico, they haven't really thought that, in 20 years' time, I'm going to go back to Canada or back to the UK. But because they've not been a resident there, and normally they've moved here for tax reasons anyway, they've not been contributing to any kind of pension plan. They've not been contributing to any kind of investment. And the actual investments that they can access, if they were still in the UK, for example, like legally, as soon as you're no longer a resident, you can't contribute to those anymore. And so it's a lot more challenging, not just to invest, because there's definitely things like eToro and all sorts of brokerage accounts that you can access. But it's doing that in a way that gives you good access to various different ETFs and funds that aren't always available. Especially in Mexico, you're really limited on what you can access outside of Mexico. And then also the ability to do that in a tax advantageous way as well. And that really hinders growth if you're in Canada, I know that the taxes are something like 30%. and so it can be really challenging trying to get compounding interest and build consistently and retire sooner or build to financial stability sooner. It's a much more difficult thing to do if you're, well, paying a lot of taxes and potentially not being allowed to contribute tax free anyway.
Right. So part of your tagline is I help nomads, expats, and LATAM residents open tax advantageous international accounts that you can access from almost anywhere in the world. So let's get right to it. What does that look
Mhm.
like?
Well, I work for a British company here in Mexico, which is a brokerage. It's called Kempton Asset Management. And so essentially, our job is to help people form relationships with a variety of different international banks that are outside of Mexico and sometimes outside of the US as well. Essentially, my job as an advisor is to sit with a client, sit with someone that is interested in planning for their future, and I work out what their requirements are in terms of time horizons, in terms of where they want to end up moving to, how often they're going to be moving, uh, and basically kind of customize an account that's going to get them hopefully all of, if not most of what they need, and then also help them once they've got the account open to sort of manage those investments in as well to get them as best return possible with the kind of risk level that they're comfortable with.
Okay. And so does someone need to be a resident in Mexico to work with you guys?
Yes, typically. There's a few countries on like our blacklist, like Argentina right now, for example. We can't really do much business there, and there's a few others that basically just um, don't pass the ethical requirements of a country in order to open an account. And it's easier for us in terms of licensing and all that if you are a Mexican resident or have a proof of address that's in Mexico. That's much easier. But yeah, Colombia, we can definitely work with people from Colombia, and most of Latin America gets covered under that.
Most of Latin America. Okay, run me through the list of. Actually, I'm kind of curious. Before, yeah, I guess this is a deviation because I want to get into what these accounts actually look like. But what
Mm.
is the blacklist? So Argentina, I can understand why that would be complicated to work with people who are registered there. Are there any other Latin American countries that you guys just flat out don't work with?
I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of any others other than Argentina right now. It's more of a case of because most of what I do is based in Mexico. If someone comes along that is from Uruguay or somewhere like that, I'd just check and see.
Okay,
And obviously
Paraguay.
different accounts as well. Yeah, Paraguay as well. I think is in the clear. Again, I'd have to double check and see.
Okay. So I get how, you're opening a Mexican brokerage account as a Mexican resident, but how does it work opening a Mexican brokerage account as a non-resident, like as a Paraguayan resident? Is there any operational difference there?
Well, I think importantly, you wouldn't be opening an account in Mexico.
Mm,
And there's a number of reasons that we try and avoid local options because we've got licensing that extends pretty much across the world. We have the options to kind of pick and choose which companies we want to work with and why, and which jurisdictions of the world we want to allow clients to open accounts in. And so we avoid Mexico and most of the other Latin American countries.
Okay, so you want
And
people to be Mexican residents, but we're not even opening the account in Mexico. So where are we opening it? What do you typically recommend?
like for me and most of our clients, I'm normally recommending something in the UK or the Isle of Man specifically, if you've heard of the Isle of Man
Dope.
before.
Yeah,
Um,
sounds offshore and James Bond like.
exactly, exactly. And there's a few key reasons for that. I mean, number one is just the security level from a governmental perspective. So if you think of like the SEC equivalent here in Mexico, their limit for even just checking accounts in terms of, I mean, the banking crisis at the start of the year, you had Silicon Valley Bank that caused a bit of a domino effect. And the SEC actually stepped in and repaid um, clients of the banks more than what their typical insurance covers. In the US, it's about $250,000 US per account. Here in Mexico, it's about $150,000 per account, and they don't cover investment accounts either. And so the reason we quite like pointing clients in the direction of the Isle of Man is that they offer a 90% level of governmental protection on investment accounts as well, with kind of no capital limit there. In fact, there is no capital
That's
limit. It's quite
sick.
clear.
That's good. Not even the U.S. does it for investment accounts. I think.
No,
Maybe
they
it
don't.
depends. Yeah.
No, they don't really. I mean, the issue. I don't typically work with American clients though,
Oh,
mostly
really?
because they're the kind of expats and nomads that don't lose their access.
Right.
Because they have to pay taxes worldwide. They can always contribute to their 401k, the Roth IRAs and stuff. That they pretty much always get that. The only time I would consider working with them is essentially when if you're investing a lot of capital and you've maxed out your tax-free contributions anyway, and you're just looking for, again, a bit more peace of mind, maybe a backup
Diversity.
jurisdiction. Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. Maybe a different currency that's not just US dollars as well. Something like Swiss francs, kind of higher
Got
net
it.
worth there.
What about the secrecy side of things?
In terms of what do you mean by the secrecy side?
Like maybe someone might think Isle of Man could be good from a secrecy perspective. Maybe they're going through a divorce or who knows, right?
I mean, if anyone is going through a divorce, that's a very advantageous place to store capital. I'll tell you that. I think one of potentially, hypothetically, one of the clients at Kempton may have opened an account in order to uh, not have their financial status disclosed during a divorce proceeding. Um, so,
Hypothetically.
hypothetically speaking, because yeah, the Isle of Man is a pretty robust jurisdiction, and they don't typically share. In fact, they just don't share account holder information with other countries and other jurisdictions. Now, it's not as robust as somewhere like Switzerland, from my understanding, but it is, for example, in a divorce proceeding. For example, one of the reasons that Mexican clients quite like the opportunity to do that is that because you don't have to declare the accounts with Hacienda, the kind of the SAT
Mm,
here, the IRS essentially of Mexico, it means that anyone that's reading your tax statements doesn't know how much wealth you have, and that can be one of the contributing factors to things like kidnapping, to things like crime
right.
associated with someone's net worth.
But why doesn't it have to be reported?
It's quite boring, really. It's all about the structure of the account.
It's like a
Um,
trust or something, or what?
uh, we can open trusts, but more, I guess the easy way to explain it is that we set it up so that you own the investment and well, you own the account rather, and your account owns the investment. So you don't actually own any of the investments, although you kind of do. It's just kind of layered, and we tend to wrap them in life insurance policies or life assurance policies. So they basically have to have a term. They have to have a death benefit. So if you pass away, you get all your capital basically, and they have to have a time frame, which is another word for a term, I guess. Um, and essentially, what that allows is it to be treated in LATAM and pretty much every country in LATAM as a life insurance. You can't tax a life insurance, but you get the full control over what you're doing with that
Mm.
capital
So
while
it's
you
almost
have
like
the
a
account.
life insurance financial product that invests in the capital markets or something. And then, if I'm understanding this right, and then how does the term work?
Yeah, so you basically, and part of my job is to help a client understand when they wanted to become financially secure, when they wanted to become um, independent, for example, or even just retire, which is kind of a big portion of what I do. And the idea is, okay, if we want to do that when you're 50, might be 25 years down the line, that would be the term. Maybe that's 10 years down the line, that would be the kind of term. But again, it might be that, again, there's a whole bunch of different ways of doing it. A client might say, well, actually, I don't care about when I retire. I want to build as much wealth as possible. But
Mm.
actually, in a couple of years' time, I want to be able to take capital out of that account. That's not a problem. We can design it in such a way that you get close to 100% liquidity after a few years. And you can just keep the easier way to describe it is an account because that's how it functions. Technically, it is a policy. Uh,
Mm.
and then You just dictate what you'd like to have happen with your investments within the policy.
This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you by Language Blend, the new best way to learn Spanish. Language Blend focuses on what you actually need to live and get by abroad with daily one-on-one lessons, a dedicated texting partner. It's like living in a Spanish-speaking country without ever leaving home. Go to languageblend.com for more information. Okay. And so, what are you typically recommending that people are investing into? Is it, um, are like, does it ultimately invest in the U.S. stock market or an international bond portfolio, or what does the actual portfolio look like?
Well, that's a question really to have with a client, because everyone's going to have different preferences, right? Some clients will want a heavy basket of crypto assets. Some clients will say absolutely no crypto, absolutely no China, absolutely no Asia, just only US. That's fine. Some clients might say, I just want bonds. Okay, we can do that. But in terms of like as a balanced, from a balance perspective, yeah, we're looking at a US, a bit of Europe, like I'd estimate around 45 to 50% US stocks and equities, and then a bit of bonds in there as a hedge, gold in there as a hedge as well, and then we kind of have a bit more kind of aggressive sectors and areas of the world in order to try and maximize growth over the next kind of five years or more.
Hmm.
And I think it's maybe important to say that when you're looking to build wealth, you can't really do that in a year, unless you want to gamble in the crypto world, right? It is something that's going to take at least 5 years. And when we're looking at strategies, we're not trying to find the next best thing to put a client into. We're looking at, okay, where's the world going to be in 5 years? And how do we maximize returns but minimize losses every year?
Got it. So let's just say we did 100% allocation to the S&P 500, right?
Yeah,
To like an ETF tracking the S&P 500.
yeah, like BlackRock iShares.
Sure. So how does that work in terms of like the management fees and the structure? Like how is it different than just maybe doing it directly?
Yeah, so I guess that comes into the difference of whether you want to work with an international account or whether you just want to open something with like interactive brokers in the US. Because if you just want to invest 100% into iShares S&P 500, you're and buy and hold it, right? You're probably going to find it is cheaper to just open a BlackRock, sorry, an interactive brokers account in the US and go ahead and chuck your money and your capital into there, which is fine. My job as
Mhm.
a financial advisor, there's not much advice to be had if someone just wants to buy and hold S&P 500. But what you'll find again, you lose that security on the account, that peace of mind. And you also have to pay taxes, right? You have to pay 20% capital gains in the US. So your, call it 10% average annualized returns has dropped down to, well, 8%. So that's quite significant. And so even if the account fees, for example, are like 1.5%, because they're relatively expensive accounts, right? You're opening something offshore. Typically speaking, the diversification leads to, in negative market years, kind of a less negative year. So it's
Mhm.
not as impactful on your loss of wealth and your
Mhm.
capital depreciation. And typically higher highs in the positive years. Not always. Sometimes the S&P 500 has a plus 20% year, and that's fantastic. But you're not paying capital gains tax on that capital. So even the 1.5%, 1.6% fee, depending on a whole variety of different factors, I'd argue that makes up for it. But again,
Mhm.
if you're just planning on buying and holding S&P 500, then working with an advisor is probably not. If you're not worried about risk, for example, it's probably not something that anyone would need in that sense.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the privacy and asset protection perspective is cool. Um, and do you find that you're working mostly with expats or with like just local high net worth Mexicans?
It's pretty much local Mexicans, to be honest, and that really comes down to the options that are available in LATAM, and specifically in Mexico. Um, Again, we were talking a bit earlier about it is important to check if you've lost access to pension accounts, if your employer is contributing to a pension account for you, or you still have access to do that, um, and your tax-free investment accounts, all of that stuff. Well, the problem is that Mexicans and most residents in other Latin countries don't have any of those options. Like right
Yeah,
now
could you explain that in more detail? Because I'd love to hear about that. Basically, like Mexicans have a hard time investing outside of Mexico. Is that the idea? And there's, I guess, like the home country bias is strong in
mm,
LATAM countries where maybe they don't have access to things. Could you talk a bit about that?
yeah, of course. So it's not really a home country bias from a population perspective. It's more of a legal thing. So part of the laws here in Mexico mean that a Mexican company can't offer any investment in any other currency than the peso. So when you're looking for even brokerage accounts that can access US stocks and equities, everything is displayed in pesos and it's returned in pesos, and the charges are in pesos. So that offers kind of limited flexibility. Obviously, better than only investing in Mexican assets as well. Um, but again, for things like investment savings accounts with a bank, they might be able to get you a 12% return right now because interest rates are so high. But that's going to be returned in pesos. It's an investment in pesos. And so the Mexican peso, just with every other LATAM currency, is notoriously volatile and weak over the long term compared to the US dollar or the euro or any of the other traditional strong currencies. And so there is a real need for people in Mexico to try and get their assets, especially those that are kind of top 5%, top 10%, into something a bit more stable, something that, again, over the next 5, 10, 15 years is going to more than likely maintain its value against the peso, or more than likely increase its value against the peso. So they're very limited in terms of options there. And then with the brokerage accounts that you can access here, if you're only a Mexican citizen with only a Mexican residency, you're going to find it difficult to open something that allows you to access, more than maybe 50 US stocks and equities. I think they've only just recently
Wow.
allowed an S&P 500 tracker, which is pretty good if you're Mexican. And that's really on the investment side of things. Like that's one issue with brokerage accounts. I think one of the biggest issues I see, and I see it a lot because I do a lot of analysis on local options for clients that have taken these things out. Um, Normally, the structures are pretty brutal in terms of fees. Um, Clients can be paying two. I looked at one this week with a company called Scandia, uh, and it's like the way the account's structured. Basically, it's going to be 2.2% per year, and then you have to write to them and ask them to explain what the other fees are. And they don't disclose advisor fees as well. So, in terms of investment options within Mexico, they're in pesos still, and they're pretty expensive. And so the access is limited there. On the retirement front, though, this is kind of where Mexicans have drawn the short straw, and I guess most of the Latin countries as well, is that the way that they structure their pension scheme or the structure their pension system, it's what's called an Afore in Mexico. Can't remember what it stands for. My Spanish isn't great, but essentially, without going into too much boring detail that I don't know 100% of as well, the government's kind of reached their money into that pension pot a fair amount of times, and it's very unlikely that anyone is going to actually see any kind of returns from their capital. It's a very small percentage that gets put in. Essentially, someone's going to have to work all the way up until they're 70, and even then, they're going to get a very small return in pesos, if any return at all. That's the general sentiment, and that's if you look at the government's books as well, kind of the prediction of what's going to happen. And then this is the second time in like 30 years that the government's changed the law. and they're going to change it again very shortly because it's not working and they don't have any money. So they're looking for another option to give to their populace in order to try and get them something when they retire. But yeah, most Mexicans under the age of 45 are going to really struggle when it comes to having any kind of capital when they retire.
Hmm. And what's the proposed law about?
So essentially, there's obviously a whole bunch of different ways that a country can manage and organize its pension scheme. So France, for example, they're kind of writing right now about the way that they're doing it. But the way that they used to do it is that you kind of log or store a bunch of hours with the government, and when you retire, you get those kind of hours back, and the people that are paying for that are the current workers. So you're paying someone else's pension, and then when you retire, a younger person that's working is paying your pension.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how it used to be done here in Mexico, as far as I'm aware. And then they changed it to a more American-based model, or maybe a more UK-based model of kind of, okay, you're going to get X amount of money that's contributed, as the government are going to match that, and then you can kind of choose what to do with the investment or what to do with your own pension fund. That's how it's done in the UK. And I believe 401ks, like employer match 401ks, are very similar in the US. And I think they're talking about changing it to that one. I think right now it's kind of a hybrid of both. Again, it's an area of Mexican law that I'm not 100% confident in explaining accurately. The key takeaway, though, is that the amount of capital you're going to get in retirement is very close to zero. And I don't really have to explain it because most Mexican people do understand that already. In fact, I've never met anyone that said, oh no, my Afore is going to completely cover my retirement. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it totally makes sense for, natural born Latinos to want to diversify outside of their local currency and outside of stocks from their local country. So it totally makes sense. Obviously, my audience is a bit more nomads and expats.
mm.
So let's get back to how they could use your service and who maybe the right archetype is for your service.
Yeah, I think it really depends on what your financial goals are. If you're looking for the option of getting to financial independence, if you're looking for that option of just kind of making sure you're putting some capital out of sight, out of mind, so that wherever you kind of move in the world in 15 years' time, you know that you're going to have $500,000 sat there, and you can kind of do what you like with it. It's a good option because I think, again, from the people I've spoken to, most people move to LATAM for a variety of different reasons. Obviously, lower cost of living, but one of the big ones is reducing their tax burden,
Mm-hmm.
especially people from the UK, especially people from Canada, especially um, other countries in LATAM. They move to a better LATAM country, if you like.
Yep.
And pretty much as soon as you stop paying taxes, you're probably not contributing to any kind of wealth building or retirement or portfolio, if you like, that's going to allow you to become financially independent. So you really have to take it into your own hands.
Makes
And
sense.
again, it's kind of what I'd say one of the biggest benefits of working with myself and Kempton is that, like, my job's not over once we've opened you the account, if you like. My principal role is meeting with existing clients and finding out what's going on in their own lives. And so if you've got a nomad that's going to be changing country and maybe, I don't know, 5 years time decides to settle down with a nice Latina in Puerto Rico or something, making sure they've got the capital to buy a house, whatever it happens to be, send the kids to college, um, get to that stage of financial independence where they have a bit more flexibility and freedom. And I think that's what most people are moving to LATAM for, is the flexibility and freedom.
Yeah. Hey guys, quick interruption to tell you about Bitrefill. Bitrefill is the best way to convert your crypto into gift card balances. These are gift cards that you can spend at hotels.com, Airbnb, Nike, and many more. You may remember Joel Valenzuela, previous podcast guest. He's been living on crypto exclusively since 2015, and he's a big consumer of Bitrefill. And so I asked Joel, I said, what do you like most about Bitrefill? He said that he likes the instant delivery, the precise amount so that you don't have to juggle a lot of gift cards, and he loves the global selection. Nobody else has this much selection of gift cards, over 10,000 gift card options across hundreds of countries. Go to bitrefill.com to sign up, and you can also use the code MyLatinLife for 10% back off your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information. So let's say a UK guy, he's making money online, e-commerce business. He moves to Costa Rica to be tax-free, right?
Yeah.
So he's chilling. He got rid of the UK food. He's loving life in Costa Rica. He's making a lot of money, and now he needs somewhere, I guess, to invest the money. So walk us through what we're doing with this UK entrepreneur living tax-free in Latin America.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, we need to have a meeting. So I'd need to sit down with this UK entrepreneur and talk to him about kind of how his business is going, kind of what his income is, like how long he sees himself doing that for, like what else he's doing, like how much he's spending, how much partying is he doing in Costa Rica, kind of what's going to be a financially smart decision for him in terms of looking at where he is right now with his finances, kind of compared to where he'd really like to be, in what kind of time frame that's going to take, and then working out a financial solution or a financial path that's going to allow him to, maybe if he's doing really well with his e-commerce, start investing something on a regular basis that's going to get him to his total overall wealth goal, let's say of 2 million US dollars within the next 15 years. You might be able to just start contributing to an investment account straight away. It might be that, well, he needs to keep investing and reinvesting into his e-commerce business in order to generate more cash flow, but at the same time start diversifying just from the business itself and start investing a smaller amount with the idea of building up towards that goal over time.
Mhm.
And again, the different type of account options are all going to change based on his time horizon, how much capital he's got ready to invest, how much of a financial target he's looking to achieve, when he needs the liquidity, what kind of emergencies could come up, where is he going to move, is he going to go back to the UK, is he going to maybe go to Canada, is he going to go to, I don't know, Argentina for a bit, how's that going to work? And then we'll do some research, have a look, start designing some account options, and then we'd start talking more about strategy. So it's sort of designing the account first, and then pretty much once you've got the account, you can access essentially the entire global market of investment options. And that's where I come in more as okay, now we're going to look at the investment advice and build you a strategy that gets you, again, the highest level of returns normally with the risk level that a client's comfortable with. So that's kind of how the process works for opening an account.
Okay. What are there setup fees? Is there like a minimum investment amount to make it make sense?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend any investment for less than 500 US dollars a month. Um, that depends. If you're looking for an investment that's over the next 10 years, it doesn't make much sense to look for anything less than $1,000 a month.
Hmm.
And if you're looking for something with a shorter time frame, that's when we start looking at building lump sum portfolios. So kind of 3, 5, 8, 10 years. Again, there's varying minimums depending on the institutions, but wouldn't look at anything less than $50,000 normally, because with all the different accounts, there's obviously percentage fees, but then there's also some fixed fees as well. So it's something like a $400 a year like management fee, and that's fixed. So the higher amount you invest, the lower percentage of your portfolio that is.
Gotcha. So 50K is a good target minimum overall investment, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. If you're looking for something a bit shorter term, there's typically a lot more flexibility with those options as well, because the kind of things you can access for $50,000 are typically a lot more sophisticated and a lot more flexible than the kind of things that you can access for $500, right? So depending on your financial capabilities, it's going to limit the options that we can access.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It's just what's the best option for you right now, I think, is the most important thing.
Okay, got it. So with the example of our entrepreneur guy, maybe he says, "Look, I don't have 50K sitting there yet. Not prepared
Mm,
to do like to send you guys 50K, but I'm totally down to invest 2K a month. Let's
mm,
just say. Um,
mm.
how does is that would that be decent or?
Yeah, it would be. I mean, it depends on his financial targets, right? Because if he wants to get to $1 million, if he's investing $2,000 a month, he could do that within 20 years. So he'd get to $1 million in 20 years' time, investing $2,000 a month,
Mhm.
which isn't bad considering over that time his total invested amount's probably only around 360K, something like that off the top of my head.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
But if his goal is like 2 million, well, yeah, he could start with $2,000 a month, and then in 5 years' time, maybe he moves somewhere cheaper than Costa Rica. Not sure the price is there, but and more capital becomes available, or maybe he sells his e-commerce business, and all of a sudden he's got a whole variety of capital available, and it's like, okay, we can put 500K into an account within, I think, within 8 years you'd get to 1 million with that anyway. So
I like it. I mean, makes sense. Makes sense to me. I guess the general idea is, these expats who are moving to low tax countries, they do need to invest somehow, and it's going to be more difficult to invest back in their home country because it might even flip the thing about tax residency, right? Because they don't want to build ties in a country that they left for tax purposes. So they got to start investing somewhere else, right? They got to build international brokerage accounts and so forth. So totally makes sense. And I like the idea of um, um, Isle of Man and the UK in general. Sounds like a good place to do it. Um, I know you wanted to touch a little bit on crypto. I was surprised that you said that it's possible to invest in crypto from one of these accounts that you guys set up for people.
yeah, it's actually relatively straightforward with most of the accounts, especially like lump sum portfolios. Obviously, as BlackRock's ETF gets approved, and all of these different investment vehicles that are just ETFs for different crypto assets start coming into the play, and that's going to allow even more investment from our side. Now, whether we'll make that recommendation to clients or not, I'm not sure. I think one thing as an advisor, it's always important. Maybe if one takeaway for anyone that's listening could be that any speculative financial investment that you make should always come from a position of financial strength. So whether that's a house in Puerto Vallarta, whether that's a investment property that needs a lot of work in Nicaragua, or whatever it happens to be, that's all speculative, right? You're hoping that the value of the area and the property goes up. And normally you don't have a real estate background when you do that. Yeah, so I'm a big believer in crypto. I think Bitcoin is almost 100% going to be the future, but it's something that's not been proven yet, and so it still is speculative. And as I was saying, all speculative financial decisions really should be made from a position of financial strength. So
Hmm.
that means having your long-term financial structures and investments in place that are going to get you towards financial freedom, regardless of how the speculative investments do. Whether that is the house in Nicaragua, whether that is the Yucatan Peninsula is a big talking point in Mexico, because there's so many there's so many real estate projects that are going on there. They're just begging that AMLO finishes the Maya train and that tourism sees a massive boom. But that's the thing, they're speculative. And so, yeah, you can be promised like a 10% rental return and all these different things. But what's going to be guaranteed? Well, markets go up over time. You know, what is going to be the most likely thing? That the S&P 500 on average continues to generate at least 9% per year for the foreseeable future. and that world markets trend upwards, especially over the longer period. And so, yeah, crypto, I love it,
Okay,
but you shouldn't have
cool.
all your eggs in that one basket.
And that's cool that you guys offer those opportunities to the clients.
Yeah, so I mean, as I was saying, that we're waiting for the ETFs to be approved, and again, whether that will jump into our portfolio or not, I can't be 100% sure. That's for the portfolio team, that's for the analysts, and then as the advisors, we can take their recommendations and help clients understand those and so on. But there's a like one of the things that we can access right now is something called 21 Shares Crypto Basket, which is an index that essentially functions very similarly to an ETF, but it's more actively managed, because what they do is they just pick the top five cryptos essentially,
Hmm.
and essentially the philosophy behind the fund is that they look at 2050 market capitalization. So what the market cap of the top five cryptocurrencies will be in the year 2050, and they basically split the strategy evenly between those in terms of percentage of market capitalization. So right now it's 51.9% Bitcoin, 33% Ethereum, 7.7% XRP, 3.9% Solana, and then 3.2% Binance Coin. So it's a good option. Uh, Again, maybe you're very into the crypto world, and if you don't need something like this, right? You're going to have your own cold wallets, and you're going to have your own systems in place to buy and store crypto safely, and you're going to have your own strategies and go after your own meme coins. But maybe you're like, no, I think I like the idea of crypto, but I want more traditional investment as well. Maybe we can put a small portion of the portfolio into this to give them some exposure, which is something that, again, over the next few years, especially, I think a lot of clients are going to start, more traditional clients, I guess, are going to start using this as well, which is quite exciting.
Yeah, yeah, pretty cool. What about your personal story? What brought you to Mexico? Were you sent by your firm, or did you come to Mexico on your own terms and then kind of got involved in the finance community?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a roller coaster for me. I used to play poker professionally,
Oh,
and I used to coach as well. So as soon as I finished university, I just started playing poker online, live, mostly cash games, some tournaments. And my friend who I was living with at the time, he just finished university as well and wanted to go on a bit of a gap year before he started work. And he was like, he just came down one day. I was like in the office, actually coaching someone, and he came down and said, "Hey, do you want to
coaching
move to
poker.
Mexico?" Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
he came down and he was like, "Yeah, do you want to just move to Mexico?" I was like, "What?" um, sure, let's do it. And so I think we booked our flights within a month of that, and flew out. We were supposed to travel around, so we went to kind of Cancun,
Yeah, Playa del
Playa del
Carmen has a
Carmen.
big,
Yeah,
big poker professional community.
yeah, exactly. And I had some contacts there anyway, so I went and said hello, and then pretty much flew to Mexico City, and then I just kind of fell in love. I don't know if you've ever been, but there's
Yeah.
something magic. There's something magic to me about Mexico City, and I kind of just stayed. Then I went back to the UK, but I kind of met a girl, and so I carried on playing poker, and then flew back over a year ago now to see her basically, and then I met one of the partners of the firm playing poker,
Ah,
and he was
there you go.
like, "Yeah, you should stop doing that. Stop playing poker. Come and try working with us." So they took me under their wing, trained me up, started putting me through all the processes, and basically how to do everything correctly. And yeah, within about a week, I'd started all that training of me being in Mexico again. It didn't take very long, and now we're engaged, so it was worth it.
No way, you and your girl?
Yeah, yeah. So going to be staying here for the indefinite future, I think.
That's awesome, bro. Congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just started this week a little Telegram group for gringo dads in Latin America. So offline, I'll tell you about that. And if anyone listening to this is a gringo dad in Latin America, we started a little group, which I think is a pretty novel concept. Um, so that would be cool.
Yeah, I think
Wow.
so.
Hmm. I was gonna say something. Or was it? Have you ever gone to those like illegal Chinese casinos in Mexico City?
Um, I'm not sure if they're Chinese, but I've been to a few. This is the thing about poker, though. Wherever you are in the world, you'll find an underground game. I was in Iceland and found an underground poker game. And I was only in I was in Reykjavik for 2 days, and on the first night, I managed to find an underground poker game um, run by some Russians. And then here in Mexico, yeah, again within about a week, there's so many home games and private things, and
uh,
which is good because it's a great way to meet people. And even if you're not very good at poker, normally, and the stakes can be pretty high, I guess, but again, if you're half decent at poker and just want to meet people, like most of the poker community that go to those kind of things, in my experience, are typically pretty friendly people. Um, you know that unless you piss everyone off, which, if you've been playing poker for a while, you can probably learn how not to do that,
hmm
and it's a really good opportunity to, especially if you're new into any kind of city, to go and meet people and talk to them, learn the language as well.
Hey everybody, hey everybody. Quick break from the podcast to tell you about Language Blend, the best new way to learn Spanish. Language Blend was co-founded by Jake Nomada, friend of the podcast, decade of experience in Latin America, and Jake and his team, they put everything into this program that they wish they had in terms of how to level up quickly with your Spanish language skills. Because the faster that you can get conversationally fluent in Spanish, the better the experience that you're going to have in Latin America. So go to languageblend.com for more information. Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I heard there's these like Chinese casinos in Mexico City, and it's not just poker. They have like slots and all types of crazy stuff. I've never been, but I have it on good word. But anyway, I don't want to get you in
Well,
trouble.
I know what I'm going to be hunting for these now. Um, no, I've not been to. Though I've been to a few underground poker games here, but never at any kind of casino. It'd be interesting to find them. I probably could find one pretty quickly. But
No, but seriously though, I think it's really cool to see people from outside of Mexico come to Mexico City and start contributing to the capital markets in Mexico because there's already good momentum there, and I think all that one of the big things that Mexico needs is that human capital, is uh, is foreigners with experience in financial markets and so forth to help build up the local financial markets here and to build up the industries here. So I think what you're doing is a great example of how foreigners can make the move from being digital nomads themselves to actually start getting involved in the local economy and local community. So hats off to you.
yeah, 100%. I mean, Mexico's 100. Well, I say 100%, but very likely to go on a bit of a boom. Maybe the kind of like what we saw in the '60s with all the nearshoring, with all of the oil. I
hmm
think it's going to depend a lot on the elections next year as to kind of the philosophy of where they are going to move as a country, moving forward. But for sure, people with experience, I mean, people that want to get into the world of, be it finance, but also just a lot of tech work here as well. Um, and you don't necessarily need to speak Spanish to do a lot of this. A lot of Mexicans will speak Spanish, will speak English, sorry, and it is a great way to contribute to the economy. And it's nice to see Mexico grow more. Even in the couple of years I've been here, it's grown so much and become much more vibrant. I feel like there's a lot more money coming in, a lot of new money, and
hmm
actually being able to help people with that. It's something that I don't take lightly. I don't take it for granted. It's a privilege to be trusted enough with someone's potential life savings, and helping them, well, either build towards those life savings or just optimize what they're doing. It isn't something that, I take lightly or for granted because it is something that's such an important thing for a lot of people.
Hmm.
But then when you learn what the options are in LATAM and Mexico, I think that there really is no comparison in terms of security and also just returns and optimization. It's just something that people don't have access to here. So it's nice to be able to provide that to them.
One or two last quick questions I want to sneak in. So regarding the account, like, what do you? My questions would be around the address that you use, and then the
Mhm.
proof of funds, if any is necessary. Like, how do you act? Are you wiring the money to the Isle of Man, or like, how do you actually get the money into the account? And is there a proof of funds process there?
Yeah, good question. So I think the important thing to be clear on is that we don't take client capital and then invest it for them. So if we design an account works well for you, your contract wouldn't be with me or Kempton. It would be directly with that institution, be that on the Isle of Man, be that on Canary Islands, be that in the Cayman Islands, wherever it happens to be. You'd sign the contract with them and you'd send your capital to them. Now, be that as a wire transfer, be that, I mean, some of the accounts let you set it up on a debit card and just take it as a card transaction. And so that's obviously much more convenient than having to go to the bank and wire capital across the world. But that's typically how they set that up. You get your receipt of transfer, and then basically we check with the bank to say, have you got it yet? And then obviously we start designing investments from there or strategies from there. When it comes to kind of proof of address, I mean, it would just be your Mexican address. Um, Now, if you're, for example, from France and you come and move here and open a bank account and then move back to France, you'd have had a proof of address in Mexico because you've got your Mexican bank account, which will have had to have
Hmm.
a residential address. And it's the same thing in like some people, for example, the Canadian citizens, they've got Mexican heritage. Maybe one of their parents is from Mexico, they've opened a bank account in Mexico. They still live in Canada, but they still have a proof of address in Mexico. Um, and so, hypothetically speaking, that would be completely legal to look at using that as a proof of address. And then I have to do my due diligence, and when the capital gets to a certain amount, that's when we have to look at proof of funds and proof of sourcing of things. Um, if you're planning on getting your dad to pay for it, for example, we can't do that. It has to be your capital from your account going into your own account with one of these different banks.
Hmm. Okay, interesting. Yeah, because I was thinking there's this program in Spain where you can get a non-lucrative visa if you have 30K in the bank. And I was almost, and a lot of people are doing this for their Latina girlfriends because they want them
Mhm.
to get the Spain visa, eventually get a Spanish passport. But what's annoying is it's hard to put 30K in a bank account for them, like locally in Mexico or Colombia because of like
Mhm.
taxes and like all these other things. So I was almost thinking maybe what you guys are doing would be cool to set up a bank account in your spouse's name, um,
I mean,
to have like
yeah,
the.
that's a privilege that we do for clients. So someone becomes a client of mine once they open an account with one of our banking partners, basically. And then once you're a client of ours, it costs us a fair amount of money to open a checking account in the same jurisdiction as your investment account.
Uh-huh.
So for clients, we'll do that. But obviously, if you have an account with us and then you want to get your girlfriend to have capital in a bank account in her name, um, in euros or US dollars or whatever it happens to be, yeah, we can. That's the kind of thing that we're happy to do for clients. It helps them out.
That's actually pretty cool. So if we do the investment account in Isle of Man, or you said you guys actually do other jurisdictions as well, like Cayman. So we do the investment account and we can layer a checking account on top of that.
Yeah, so it'd be separate to the investment account. Like it would probably it just wouldn't be with the same company
Hmm.
that you have your investment with. But the idea is that then the capital stays in one jurisdiction. That jurisdiction normally has very favourable tax laws, if not zero tax laws. in terms of investment capital gains and stuff. And then you can kind of just spend the money from that jurisdiction instead of bringing it back to Mexico or bringing it back to Canada or wherever you want to do that.
Wow. That's dude, this is the angle you should be using more because people like just having checking accounts as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously people like checking accounts. I've had one client who just opened an investment account with us to get the checking account.
Uh-huh.
But ultimately, again, my fiduciary responsibility is to a client. I'm not going to open you an investment account if it's not within your financial capabilities or doesn't make financial sense for you. Now, those kind of people that just want a checking account offshore normally have enough capital to where it's like they can quite comfortably put a small amount of money every month, or 50K is kind of nothing to them, and they just want to like, yeah, I'm happy to diversify, and you look after this and give me a checking account. Fine, yeah. But yeah, for someone that maybe is not on the super wealthy side and is just it's not good financial advice to say, well, yeah, open this account and then I'll get you a checking account. It's not, it doesn't feel ethical to me, and it's not a good way of doing business.
Interesting. Cool. And so it's what are some of the jurisdictions that people can open the investment account in? So you said it's not just Isle of Man, there's a couple.
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with people on the Cayman Islands before. I know that obviously Panama, Bahamas, some US, mainland UK, Isle of Man, Jer- uh, Guernsey, or Jersey. Maybe it is Jersey. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's been a long morning. But yeah, it really depends. And also as a firm, we're constantly looking at all the different options on the market.
Mm-hmm.
There's some things that essentially have lower fees, but the same level of protection. There's some things that have better access to world markets. So I think we've kind of stopped working with a lot of Cayman Island companies recently because of the safety there. And like Mauritius, again, it's in Africa. People don't know where it is. There's no advantages to having an account in Mauritius that you don't get with something like the Isle of Man. And so it's a case by case basis, but typically we're looking for the best thing at any one time, and then going through the process of getting licensing and basically being qualified to offer those products to clients.
No, very cool. Sounds like you guys can do a lot of things for people. Very cool. I need to start wrapping this up. It's for anyone listening to this, it's only 11:30 a.m. here in Mexico, and I have other work to do, so it's a little shorter than some of my typical podcasts. But Jacob, dude, this was really, really interesting. Really cool to hear the financial perspective on options available to expats in Latin America. And I can definitely see this being valuable to a lot of people. So, Jacob, why don't you take this time to direct the audience's attention to wherever you want.
Well, I really appreciate it, Vance. Thank you for having me on. I'm sure it was valuable for some. Check to make sure, everyone, that you are not losing access to certain privileged accounts that you have from your birth nation. And if you want to talk to me, my Twitter's Topley Jacob, and that's probably the easiest place to reach me. And yeah, thank you ever so much, Vance, for having me on.
Absolutely. And guys, tell Jacob that you heard the podcast, My Latin Life, to get treated extra special.
Yeah, 100%.
Cool, man. Well, Jacob, thanks again for doing this. Again, my guest today, Jacob Topley, Offshore Investment Consultant based in Mexico City. All the links will be in the show notes. Thanks, everyone, for listening.